Hello, the name's BrianTheBrain, and I have finally done it. I have beat all 7 3D Mario games, and with this power, I have become a nerd that has too much to say about these games made for children. So, Mario, right? Mario first appeared in 1981's Donkey Kong, and his first real game would be Mario Bros. In 1983, and then in 1985, Super Mario Bros. Came out and saved the North American gaming industry. Yeah, we all get it. I don't need to explain what this fat Italian plumber is all about. It's already widely known how much of an impact Mario has made in, well, the entire medium of gaming as a whole, revolutionizing how a platformer is made, in both 2D and 3D, and the everlasting effects of his success on how other companies went about competing with the plumber, such as Sonic literally being made with the sole purpose of dethroning him. It's a story that's almost as old as gaming itself, and much like the best of stories, it has been told by many people time and time again, such as all these other videos on YouTube. That's why I think it would be better to introduce my own experiences with Mario and his many adventures. Much like most other kids, Mario is what got me into gaming as a whole, even before I started to play games at the age of 4. I used to have some DVDs of the Super Mario Bros. Super Show and the Super Mario Bros. 3 show that my parents got for me, and that was my first introduction to the concept of both strange green pipes that take you to wherever, and also what it's like to be a fat plumber. I already knew what it was like to be Italian since, well, I am Italian as well. If you don't believe me, then check this out.
It's me, Brian, pizza, pasta, ravioli, spaghetti, gumba, mamma mia, wahoo!
Believe me now? You better, or you'll be sleeping with the fishes real soon. Hey, why are my glasses in there? Eventually, once I became old enough to be able to play games, the first ever game I got was Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Now I know that this isn't a Mario game, but to 4-year-old me, this was a Mario game to me back then, as well as a Sonic game. I mostly played as either Mario or Sonic. I have since spent thousands of hours into the game. Sometime later though, I would get my first real Mario game, which was New Super Mario Bros. Wii. I ate this game up, even if I never got too far into it, only ever getting to World 5 at most. But I would simply just keep replaying the worlds that I could beat, and that was more than enough for me. Besides Mario's spin-off games like Mario Kart Wii and Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, however, that was the only mainline Mario game that I had at all. I didn't have Galaxy 1 or 2, or New Super Mario Bros. DS on my white DS Lite with a Nerf case. Anyone remember those DS Nerf cases? Anyway, it would be quite a while till I got my next mainline Mario game, which also became my first 3D Mario game, and that game was Super Mario 3D Land. I absolutely adored this game. Kid me just found it to be so addicting. I remember beating the game over and over again, which is something I had never done before. I wasn't really one to ever finish my games. Most of the time I wasn't good enough to do so, but 3D Land was easy enough to where I could do that, and have a great time doing so. I would play the hell out of both 3D Land and Mario Kart 7, until it was my 3DS, which was the original Aqua Boom model. This was also around the time where I became interested in learning more about gaming history and culture, and I have found out about all the Mario games that I've been missing out on. The NES and SNES games, Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, Galaxy 1 and 2, 3D World, and eventually Odyssey. I have since played all of these games since that research, which has started doing ever since like 2012, and now that I am 20 years old, I have a much greater appreciation for the franchise ever since, and have gone on to play all these games at some point. For the purpose of the video, I have replayed every 3D Mario game as well, for the purposes of the title. The Evolution of 3D Mario, a Constructive Analysis. Think of what you're about to watch as more so an examination of every game, rather than a retrospective. I will be talking about all 7 3D Mario games in depth, discussing what worked, what didn't work, and, in the last section, I'll be talking about what Nintendo could do to make the next 3D Mario game on the Switch 2 the best in the series. But let's kick off this look through the entirety of 3D Mario with the game that started it all, and that is the first ever 3D platformer that forever changed how not only platformers are made as a whole, but how a game should be made in 3D as a whole. Super Mario 64 starts off this particular Mario lineage with a big bang. It can't be understated how much of a golden standard this game is, and how it was able to achieve what it did with little to no prior reference, other than how they would go about transitioning Mario into the realm of 3D. Even after every other game in the series, this one is still my personal favorite out of all the 3D games, and even though that is still relatively popular opinion, I'll do my best to help those who do not think so understand why it's my personal favorite. The game has the perfect start to any platformer, just this vast open space where you're not pressured to do anything. Your goal isn't clear yet, and you don't even know why you're 3D instead of 2D now, but you still get the feeling that you should take this time to familiarize yourself with how this version of Mario controls. You'll become acquainted with now prominent parts of Mario's moveset. A moveset that consists of the triple jump, which is done by timing 3 jumps at the exact moment Mario hits the ground for extra vertical distance. The side somersault, which is done by moving in one direction, snapping the analog stick to the exact opposite direction, and jumping. The long jump, which is just done by getting a running start, crouching, and then jumping. The wall kick, which is basically just a wall jump. The ground pound, which is done by jumping and then pressing crouch. The backward somersault, which is done by jumping while crouching still, and some melee moves you're probably never going to use, but they're hilarious to use. Once you become familiar with Mario's moveset, you go into Peach's castle, which basically acts as a hub where you can access the many levels of the game, and most of them are paintings that Mario can just go into for some reason. Don't question it, this is the same series where a giant turtle is the enemy of a fat Italian plumber from Brooklyn. Each world is a huge pseudo-open world with numerous objectives with your own power stars attached to them, quite a departure from the at the time series' normal shtick of simply going from point A to B. These objectives can range from simply being a boss, solving a puzzle, collecting red coins, or just what the hell ever. One of the game's best traits is how it manages to create all these objectives in one world, instead the world and game as a whole never feels monotonous or tedious. Some stars are tied to some admittedly pretty annoying puzzles though, like how the hell was I supposed to know that I had to break a certain number of boxes in mission 3 of Wet Dry World? That's just the thing however, the stars encourage you to explore the world yourself, figure out the answers to that question that you asked, and many others. This game was made to be explored, and it's very satisfying when you do solve a confusing puzzle by yourself, and not have to look at your trusty Nintendo powered guide. It's those questions that add a sense of wonder and mystery to the game, and it makes this wacky, insane world actually feel alive, like it has something to tell, which is something all these games are great at doing, but especially this game right here. Even despite its hardware limitations, and the fact that it manages to pull that feat, despite that, is incredibly impressive. At the end of it all, when you finally get enough power stars to beat Bowser and save Princess Peach for the 27th time, it feels like you have gone through the adventure of a lifetime, and the progress you have made is something you will forever remember. I've been in this game multiple times, and each and every time, it's always like that. It also helps that how you progress to the next floors, which have a power star requirement, is all up to you, since you can choose which worlds you want to do first and last. There is plenty of freedom in the game, and that's one of its best aspects. Speaking of, let's begin with our first...
What worked?
This is easily the best part of the game, which is shocking considering that this is Mario's first 3D hurrah. But to me, Mario is easily at his best here when it comes to how he feels to control and how perfect his overall movement is. In comparison to, well, all of the other 3D Mario games, Mario's moveset in 64 is all physics based, which allows the player to control how quickly he can scale the many levels of the game by using the environment to your advantage. You can easily see how this plays into the game with the boatload of speedruns for the game, with 64 easily having the most speedruns out of all of the games, and for good reason of course. Due to the physics-based nature of Mario's moveset, it allows for the most control over him in the entire series, which allow for the most insane speedrun strats I have ever seen, the likes of which you just don't see in the later games. It may sound like this is something that worked purely for how well it benefits speedrunning, but I couldn't be any further from the truth. It is a big part of speedrunning, yes, but anyone who plays the games can feel for themselves how snappy Mario is in this game, and even more inexperienced players can find shortcuts to certain stars, simply due to what Mario is capable of. A better way to describe this would be the limits that Mario himself is constrained to, but the limits here are practically non-existent in comparison to the later games which all have animation-based movesets. A great example would be how once you get to the last room of the game, you can do the other levels as you're intended to, or if you're just epic like me, you can BOJ, which is short for backwards long jump, up the stairs to the final Bowser fight of the game. Alright, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna BOJ. Check this out.
Whoa! 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 Whoa!
It's a huge reason why I keep coming back to the game time and time again. Each playthrough I learned something new about the moveset that I didn't know before. Another big reason why I come back to the game is one of the aspects of the game I had mentioned before, that being how you're able to choose how you progress through the game. 64 is anything but linear. It's the most non-linear game of the series. In the forests that you have access to, you can choose which worlds you want to do, with there being no order to them whatsoever. Don't want to start with Bomb Battlefield? The game doesn't care, go do Womp's Fortress or Charlie Roger Bay instead. It's entirely up to you. In my opinion, 3D Mario is at its best when you're given the choice to explore how you want to explore, rather than having to adhere to a more linear progression system. One thing that remains constant, however, no matter what, you have to beat the boss at 4 of the castle, which is always Bowser. Each Bowser fight is tied to one of the 3 floors of the game, and once you defeat Bowser in one of them, the next floor opens up with its own set of worlds. The gameplay loop as a whole is basically just get enough power stars in the worlds you have access to so you can get to the next floor, rinse and repeat until you finally save Peach. I know that sounds repetitive, but each world is its own unique world. None of them ever feel like they're reskins of another or pure carbon copies. There are some reuses of missions, but the missions never feel the same to complete, since every level has its own unique level design. Bomb Battlefield has a star where you beat the boss of that world, which is King Babam. Simply throw him until he explodes and you get the star. Womp's Fortress has a star with that exact same setup, except not only is Womp's Fortress an entirely different world from Bomb Battlefield, but the boss, who is the Womp King, is also completely different from King Babam. You have to wait for him to attack, and then give him the good old plumber's crack.
Hey, that rhymed.
That goes for the entire game, so it never once becomes repetitive or monotonous in its entire 7 to 8 hours of duration. Besides Mario's moveset and the open-ended nature of both the game's progression and its levels, another big reason why the game is such a blast through, is a smaller but just as important aspect of the game, which is its brilliant soundtrack. The entire game's OST was recorded with chiptune music, which works a lot like MIDI. I am by no means an expert of music composition, but I will try to explain what it is to the best of my ability. Chiptune music is when it instructs the CPU on what outputs it has to make, whether it's high or low. It's much like MIDI due to how it's basically like a digital music sheet, and the sounds the system produces is due to the instructions of chiptune music. What does all this mean for how the music actually sounds? Well, the samples themselves come from either real or synthesized instruments, and the results for 64 make all of the music have this early digital feel to it. It's hard to describe for someone like me who instead makes video essays on YouTube rather than making music, but take a listen yourself. It all has its own vibe that I simply can't put into words, but whenever I hear it, it's exactly what I think about, and it's most likely the same way for you too. I can't tell you how many videos I've seen that use 64's music in the background. The most I can say is how it all feels connected to each other, despite each piece of music being separate to its own world, except for the worlds that reuse music, like Dire Dire Docks reusing Charlie Roger Bay's music. It all has this sense of wonder to it. Each piece feels like it's telling you a different story, which innately makes you want to explore more of the world that the piece is in. It makes each world feel more like an actual world, rather than levels that exist just for the sake of the game, and it gives the game a burst of life. Speaking of a burst of life, another aspect of the game that worked is the game's art style. Weirdly enough, nowadays I hear a good amount of people critique the game's visuals, and say how they haven't aged well due to the blockiness and flat looking textures. Admittedly, the game isn't the best looker. There are better looking games even on the same system, such as Majora's Mask and Banjo-Kazooie, but the game is by no means ugly. Even despite the low poly nature of the game, which is to be expected considering the game is turning dirty next year, the actual art style itself has held up incredibly well. It's so colorful and vibrant. The entire game looks like an emulation of a cartoon in a 3D space. I would actually say the simplistic textures work to the game's benefit, as it makes the environment feel more like actual cartoon worlds. I wouldn't say that it looks any different from how an episode of The Simpsons would look from around that time, minus the fact that, you know, it's 3D. 3D. Mario and the other characters all look like translations of themselves from the 2D promotional artwork from that time, and they fit incredibly well in these environments. It's why I don't get these criticisms surrounding the game's visuals, since it looks the way it does because of the fact that it's going for a cartoony art style that I feel has aged very well. I feel like it's easier to see that when you actually play the game on the original hardware on the proper display, like a CRT. Having played 64 on an actual N64 on an actual CRT before, that was definitely the case for me. It made me appreciate the game's visuals even more than I did before. The softness of a CRT helps mask the parts of the game that you weren't meant to see, such as the models looking worse when they're far away for optimization reasons. Most people nowadays play the game for the first time on their Switch on a modern TV, so that's likely where a lot of criticism comes from. While I don't agree with the visuals being one of the things that didn't work with the game, I do have my own criticism in the game that I want to address in the first...
What didn't work?
Notice how I said criticism and not criticisms. This is a near perfect game to me, and it's my favorite 3D platformer of all time. I can't help but love every aspect of this game, so it was really hard for me to come up with something that I didn't like about the game, but I finally come to a conclusion. The one thing that didn't work about the game for me isn't a big thing either, rather it's one singular level. One level that I did not like at all, and the only level in the game I can play, look at, and say, "Wow, Wallace, this is worse than the time they put kiwi on pizza."
My god, my Peter voice is so bad.
And that level is probably one that most of you hate too. That level is Rainbow Ride. I'm sorry to anyone who has this level as their favorite, if such a person even exists. But considering that there's an entire group of people that think 3D Land is better than Sunshine, is incredibly likely. If you are that person,
my deepest condolences.
Nah, I don't actually mean that, but I just really do not like this level. It's like a 3D version of those auto-scroller 2D Mario levels that started with Super Mario Bros. 3, and ever since it has become a tradition in the series. I never got why this became a staple in Mario games. They punish you for being too slow, but they also punish you for being too fast, since you can't control the camera yourself at all by going right. You have to wait until the camera has caught up to progress any further. I just think it's a simple solution to just have the left side of the screen always being a bunch of spikes or something that is constantly closing in on Mario, and making it so you can make the camera scroll right by being fast. It would reward you for not being slow, rather than punishing you for being too slow and too fast. In Rainbow Ride, you also have to wait for the super slow magic carpet to take you where your objectives are, and sometimes it's long enough to the point where if you don't do anything, Mario goes into his sleeping animation. That's how long you need to wait sometimes. There's little to no shortcuts you can take. This is the only level in the game where you have to play by the rules, in a game where rules are nothing but a mere afterthought. It runs contrary to what the game is supposed to be, and overall, it just feels like a waste of time to play. If they just had to bring back the auto-scrolling level mechanic from the 2D games, they should have made it a lot like Crash Bandicoot. I know 64 came out before Crash and all, but Crash still took this exact concept and massively improved upon it. Crash has a lot of levels where you're running away from an incoming boulder, and the camera is facing Crash rather than facing towards his back. There's an actual sense of urgency in these levels. You can't be too slow or else you get flattened, but the goal is to be as fast as you can. At the end of each one, you can actually look back on it and go, that was a pretty fun level, and not have to worry about why the game decided to take away your time like with the worst of the auto-scrolling levels of the Mario games. I don't want to sound too harsh, it is my least favorite level, if otherwise my favorite platformer, but I guess the things that give you the most emotional are also the things you care about the most. It's just one sour apple out of a perfect bunch, a bunch of which that consists of 24 more levels, and that should be pretty apparent how impressive a feat that is. I can never play this game and not be amazed at how much it was able to get perfectly, all on the first rodeo. The groundwork that was established with this game is something that just begged for it to be built off of. From the numerous games that had inspired since its release, to its impact on the Mario series itself, and to how integral it was to a ton of people's lives, Super Mario 64 is that rare situation where nearly everything comes together in the best of ways, and is one of the pieces of media that I can say is as close to perfect as can be. It would be even more near perfect if it weren't for Rainbow Ride, but you know what? I can look past that one blemish, and appreciate the rest of its beauty. After such an incredible start, how exactly did Nintendo decide to continue off 64's success? How would it go about taking what 64 did and improving upon it? With those questions up in the air, it's only appropriate to start talking about The successor to 64 that released 6 years after in 2002, Super Mario Sunshine aimed to take the groundwork that was established with 64 and do its own thing with it. This time around, there's a bit more focus on the story, and weirdly enough, the characters are even voice acted, minus Mario himself. The premise here is that Mario, Peach, and Toadsworth are in a plane headed towards Isle Delfino for a vacation, but trouble is foreshadowed when Peach sees a Mario-shaped figure jumping around in the background of the video advertisement she's watching. When they get to their stop, the gang encounters some strange-looking goop that's taking the form of Mario's head, and Mario can't do anything on his own until he meets with FLUDD. FLUDD stands for Flash Liquidizer Ultra Dowsing Device, and it's what allows Mario to get rid of the goop on the runway, collecting a Shine Sprite in the process, which is basically this game's version of Power Stars. Upon the collection of the Shine Sprite, Mario is taken away by Piranha police officers, having been wrongfully accused of the vandalism that is currently running rampant across Isle Delfino, and the videos that are shown indicate that someone who looks like Mario is doing this, hence why Mario is being accused by the Piranhas. Mario is found guilty for his supposed crimes and is tasked with the cleanup of Isle Delfino. In Mario's first attempts of cleaning up the place, a statue will come out of the ground upon the defeat of another of the Goop Piranhas, with the Mario figure that was really responsible for making Isle Delfino the way it is on top of it. This Mario, who I will now refer to as Shadow Mario, proceeds to kidnap Peach, and Mario stops him by using FLUDD's water. Shadow Mario fails in capturing Peach, and he makes his retreat to the first level of the game, that being Bianco Hills. This is the part in the game where we're finally at the main gameplay, which is the collecting of power sources, much like 64. You'll notice right off the bat that Sunshine's progression is unlike 64's, as not every objective can be done at once. You couldn't get the level 6 Shine Sprite if you haven't gotten the previous ones first. Each objective is basically like its own level within the level, where you're required to perform a certain task in order to get the Shine Sprite. In Bianco Hills, your first objective is to defeat another Goop Piranha that's guarding the giant windmill, and then the next one is where you have to go to the top of the windmill to engage in the PD Piranha boss fight. You can't do one or the other first. The progression has been toned down to be more linear, despite the open-endedness of these levels. Each level is completed once you get the 7th Shine Sprite of that level, which is always a mission where you have to chase down Shadow Mario and spray him with FLUDD, just like how you done before when you're trying to kidnap Peach before the first level. These are the only levels that actually matter for completion. You could have nearly all the Shine Sprites in the game through other means, but if you haven't played even the last Shadow Mario mission, you can't progress to the last level. It makes me wonder if you would be able to go to the last level if you were somehow able to only do the Shadow Mario missions. Besides that though, with the introduction of FLUDD, Mario's moveset has been upgraded since 64, and Mario even has new moves himself. There were some omissions however, such as the removal of the melee moves and the long jump weirdly enough. I can understand the melee moves for sure, they had zero use in 64, but the long jump was one of Mario's defining moves in 64. As a bit of a replacement for the long jump, they have the slide move that you do with B, which can be transitioned into sort of a long jump if you press the jump button in the slide animation. This game also brings about a move that will become a staple in Mario's moveset from here on out, which is the spin jump. This move requires you to rotate the analog stick repeatedly, and then jump in the direction you want to go. This move is busted in this game. There's almost no reason to use the side somersault anymore, since the spin jump gives you more horizontal and vertical distance. Moves such as the triple jump, ground pound, and wall kick make the return too. Mario's normal moveset is further complemented by FLUDD, as FLUDD has a nozzle that lets you hover in midair. You can use this to correct the jump that you made, or simply gain more distance than you would normally to clear a big gap. Use this hover in conjunction with the spin jump and you'll be basically flying. With this moveset at your disposal, it'll be more than enough to help you finally take down Shadow Mario and Bowser once and for all, with Shadow Mario being revealed to be Bowser's son, Bowser Jr., later on in the game. When Bowser Jr. reveals the truth, he talks about how Bowser told him that Peach is his mom, and that she was taken away by Mario, hence why Bowser Jr. keeps trying to take Peach. When you're finally able to go to the next level after beating all the Shadow Mario missions and make your way through the Corona Mountain, you will come face to face with Bowser once again, who is enjoying his own personal vacation in his hot tub. Defeat him once and for all, and everyone is sent falling back down to Isle Delfino. The game concludes with Mario and gang finally being able to have the vacation they came here for, and Bowser Jr. having a father and son moment, with Bowser Jr. telling Bowser that he knows Peach isn't his real mom, but he still wants to fight Mario again. The game was a blast to replay, much like 64, and I have a good amount to say about this game, both its strengths and its shortcomings, so now would be a good time to get to the games.
What worked?
Honestly, my favorite part about this game that hits harder for me considering I live in Florida, which is known for its great beaches, is the game's setting and overall art style. The locales in this game all ooze a sense of comfort, like you're actually on a vacation, despite the fact that you're trying to clean up the mess that a doppelganger of you caused. In combination with the game's brilliant soundtrack, which is also one of its greater strengths, it gives the game a relaxing feel that isn't seen in any of the other Mario games. Even despite the context for why we are on this adventure, it still feels like an actual adventure that you can take your time with. There doesn't feel like a sense of urgency, you're allowed to lay back and soak in the rays. Much like 64, it has a cartoony look to its visuals, evident by how vibrant and colorful it is, but unlike 64, it also has this roughness to its art style. I think you can see this the most with the game's original characters, such as the Pianas and the Nokis, who all look like they have this edge to them, and I'm not talking about the polygons. I'm talking about how, especially with the lighting system of the game, they, and everyone else in the game, has this angular look that gives everyone a unique look. Now that I have pointed that out, I think it has become much easier to tell, especially with the gameplay I have shown thus far. Even the CGI renders made for the promotional material for the game have this as well. Just take a look at this Mario render that was literally everywhere on Flash game websites like Congregate and Addicting Games, and on the box art of the game itself. Even in the CGI render, you can see this angular look of Mario, especially due to the way the light is cast onto him. Like I had mentioned before, the music plays a big part in setting the scene for the game, and it's all relaxing to listen to. I know I'm not the only one who does this for sure, but I often put some of Sunshine's music when I'm at the beach. It's always an opportunity that just cannot be missed. Even in isolation, the music can stand by itself without the leverage of the game and can be enjoyed anywhere at any time. To be fair, if there's one thing Mario always gets right, it's the music. A bigger part of the game that it does very well, even if there are some mishaps at times, which I'll eventually get to, is how amazing some of the missions are. I am aware how Sunshine is usually viewed as the black sheep of the 3D games, and how a lot of that criticism comes down to not so much the entire game as a whole, but rather how tedious some missions can be. I must agree to this to some extent, but I feel like people who make these critiques often overlook the high highs of the game. In all honesty, I actually really like nearly all of the secret levels. I love how much of a challenge they can be by simply removing FLUDD from your moveset. It makes you stop relying on FLUDD's hover to save you if you make a mistake, and encourages you to improve yourself at Mario's base moveset. I usually see people call these levels unfair, but I think most of that comes from the player's misunderstanding of Mario's controls. Once you get the hang of Mario's capabilities without FLUDD, these levels become a lot more easy, but they still provide a challenge for even more experienced players, and that's always one of my favorite attributes of the best stages in any platformer. In addition to the secret levels, a lot of the normal missions of the game were super fun, like this mission in Enchilada Beach where you had to get these cataquacks off of these mirrors. Literally any time you had to race Il Piantissimo, which are basically like if you took the Koopa the Quick mission from Bomb Battlefield in 64, but made it more challenging, on top of numerous other examples. I'd be here all day if I were to list each and every one of them though, so let's cut that here. The game has a lot to praise about it. It's very fun, usually anyway. I say usually because of what I had alluded to before when I said that there are mishaps with some of the missions. This I will further elaborate on in
What didn't work?
While I do think the game has high highs, I also must talk about why I think the game also has low lows. There are fun missions, yes, but for every runaway Ferris wheel, there's an Ewy Mouse dentist. The mission, of course, not an actual dentist, duh. When I was talking about how much I like the secret levels, there are a few I just do not ever enjoy revisiting, such as the Yoshi Go Round secret. It has a lot of blocks you have to wait for to get to the next one, and like I had mentioned with Rainbow Ride in 64, I would have much preferred if it were faster paced. It's just boring to play, not outright bad, it just doesn't have anything going for it. One secret level that is outright bad though that I absolutely despised is the Chuckster level. I don't like being negative, but screw it, this level can go to hell. The direction in which these pianos throw you at depends on how you're facing them when you talk to them, and if you're even a little off, it's off to the shadow realm with you. It just doesn't feel like you have much control, even though you can control how fast you go in the air with the analog stick. I feel like the purpose of these secret levels should be to put Mario's moveset to the test, and not be something that doesn't relate to the main gameplay of the game at all. It's a pace breaker that kills some of my enjoyment of the game whenever I have to play through it. Besides those secret levels, you have the infamous Watermelon Festival, where your goal is to bring the biggest watermelon to the pier, and even one simple mistake is enough for the watermelon to pop. The cataquacks can also come in and send the watermelon into the air, which will also cause it to pop, and the worst part about that is the beach is full of cataquacks, so you have to be careful but not too slow. Even on my third playthrough of the game, which is the playthrough that I did for this video, it was still a pain to get the watermelon to the pier, and even if it weren't, it's just not an engaging mission. Another one of my least favorite missions would have to be Mysterious Hotel Delfino in Serena Beach. I always need a guide for this one. It's basically this convoluted puzzle that has no real explanation or hints, and the goal is to be able to get Yoshi so you can clear out the booze that are in the attic, which leads to the shine spray of the mission. There isn't even any hints on what to do, you just have to explore the rooms until you find the fruit they need to get Yoshi, but it's also not clear they need Yoshi in this mission in the first place. I was stuck on what to do and needed to look up a guide to figure out how to get the shine spray, and it's never fun having to look up a guide for a game. I wouldn't really mind if the game was more clear on what to do, but as is, it just isn't a fun mission. I have mentioned that I really like the secret levels because they allow you to get better at using Mario's moveset, but Mario's moveset as a whole, it just isn't as fluid and snappy as 64. This is the game that started using animation-based moves that would then go on to be used in every other 3D Mario game, unlike 64's physics-based moveset. As a result, your speed is tied to the animations. The way you can use the environment to your advantage to complete a mission in less time are far fewer than 64. Your momentum is capped to the animations, rather than Mario himself being able to go as fast as the level allows him to like in 64. It's why in speedruns for Sunshine, while Mario can still go fast, it's more so due to a combination of the animations that allow him to go that fast, and there's a limit that Mario can reach. Like I had talked about before, Mario in 64 has practically no limits. It's insane how fast you can go depending on your experience with the game. It's not to say that there isn't a clear difference between, say, me playing the game and the speedrunner, but that difference is not as fast as the difference between me playing 64 versus one of the best 64 speedrunners. I feel as though 3D Mario is at its best when there are no limits on what you can do, the only limit being how skilled you are at the game. It also doesn't help that Mario himself is kind of slippery. You can definitely get the hang of it, and I've definitely gotten the hang of how Mario controls as well, but Mario slides and slips a little too much when moving, unlike 64, where Mario felt natural when moving. It's not a huge deal, but it makes me prefer 64 Mario a little bit more because of the difference between the two's attributes. Unrelated to what we discussed, but it does apply to something that doesn't work with the game, would definitely be the voice acting. It's strange to hear these characters have actual voices, and not in a good way. Characters like Peach and Bowser sound off when they speak, and it's part of why I believe there's a good reason why these characters usually never talk and usually just make grunts and other noises. Mario himself doesn't talk in the game, thankfully, even if I love how charming his dialogue is in the Mario and Luigi games where they speak this kind of gibberish Italian. It would be weird to have Mario start talking normally, like it has always been something that he can do besides simple sentences. There has been voice acting in the series before, like Peach reading out her letter to Mario in 64 at the start of the game and at the end of the game when Mario rescues her, but I think she sounded fine, unlike in Sunshine where she just sounds annoying. This goes for Bowser too, where he just doesn't sound like the voice I would imagine Bowser having, taking into consideration his grunts and such. None of it is something that I think devalues the game or anything, but I just think it's a good example of why these characters usually never talk for this long. Despite all that though, the game is still great fun to replay, and I definitely do not think it deserves its status as the black sheep of the series. I don't know how you can be like me, play through all of the 3D Mario games, and say Sunshine is the worst one. It's like, come on, Super Mario 3D Land is right there. Even taking into consideration its shortcomings, it's still an amazing platformer that deserves more praise than it gets. Just because some missions are a bit stinky and Mario controls a little funky and isn't as fast as he used to be, doesn't invalidate the parts of the game that are of actual quality. I think it's about time we start to get off the beach and move on to something a bit more out of this world. That's right, it's time to shoot up into space, as I'll now be tackling quite a departure from the previous two games, Super Mario Galaxy aimed to expand the series in a way that was never done before. They figured, well, we have already explored most of the Mushroom Kingdom and stuff, so why don't we explore what the Mario universe as a whole is like? That is exactly what they did with this game, and its ambition and scale have gone unmatched compared to the rest of the series, even Odyssey. Released in 2007 on the Wii, Galaxy is the next 3D Mario game in the series, but it isn't completely like 64 and Sunshine. This started to become a trend after the release of Galaxy, but Galaxy decided to basically combine the two exact opposite of the 3D games and 2D games to form its own unique gameplay. What I mean by this is that each Galaxy has its own objectives that have their own linear end to them in a point A to B fashion, more like the 2D games, but the Galaxies themselves are huge and offer a lot of exploration, like 64 and Sunshine. These objectives usually consist of getting to a certain point of the level, or taking down a boss, or even branching past a detour from the main path of one objective to get another star, like this minigame on a planet in Battle Rock Galaxy where you had to clean up a bunch of scrap metal by throwing bombs at them. A good way to describe it would be that it's much like 2D Mario in its progression, with the open-endedness and controls of the 3D Mario games. The game starts with some backstory, where we're told about how every 100 years, a comet appears in the skies above the Mushroom Kingdom, and one year, the comet was so large that it filled the sky and sent down a bunch of shooting stars. The Toads had brought the stars to the castle, where they bunched them together to make a huge power star. We're then shown a letter addressed to Mario, much like the beginning of 64, asking Mario to attend the Star Festival, where there's a gift that Peach wants to give to him. Mario of course accepts, and we're on our way to the castle. Also much like the beginning of 64, we're given this big path where we're allowed to practice Mario's moveset. Once again, you still got your standard moves like the triple jump, side somersault, wall jump, ground pound, but we also have some returning moves. These include the long jump, which makes its return from 64, the backward somersault, which makes its return from 64 as well. The spin jump also makes its return, but its application is unlike its inclusion in Sunshine. The spin jump is acquired when you gain access to the power of Illuma, and it basically acts as both a secondary attack and a double jump. It's very similar in usage to the spin kick in the Jak and Daxter games. Once you familiarize yourself with the controls, you make your way to the castle, only for Bowser to ruin the fun once again. Mario tries to save Peach, but Kamek comes in and gives Mario the Team Rocket treatment, sending him deep into space. Mario lands on a small planet, awoken by the Luma that gives Mario the ability to do this game's version of the spin jump. Eventually, Mario meets up with the other Lumas, and the leader of the Lumas, who goes by the name of Rosalina. Rosalina tells Mario about how the Comet Observatory, which basically acts as the game's hub world, cannot fly without power stars, which were all taken away by Bowser. The entire game will be just like the previous games, just collect enough power stars in the galaxies, and you'll be able to beat Bowser and rescue Peach. Even despite its more linear progression with each mission being basically its own route within the galaxy, the game never once becomes repetitive and no objective ever feels like the exact same. One of the main strengths of the game can be seen in its overall gameplay, which, of course, can only be properly discussed in
What worked?
It's like what I had said before about the game's sense of scale and ambitious nature. Each galaxy feels like just that, a galaxy. It makes you feel like you only ever explore just a speck of what there is in the galaxy, but what you do experience is the best of what that galaxy has to offer. The game is very creative with what it makes you do for these missions. These missions range from having to give the Queen Bee of the Honey Hive Galaxy the scratching of her life, a scratching that she's enjoying a little bit too much. Ugh. There's a galaxy where you have to make it to the end of this desert-filled wonderland that is riddled with holes on the floors. A galaxy where you basically play gigantic golf, not to be confused with miniature golf. A galaxy where you surf on a manta ray through floating bodies of water in the sky. An entire galaxy dedicated to Luigi's Mansion, and so much more to witness and explore. It truly makes you feel like you're exploring the actual Mario universe, rather than normal Mario locations, but they're in space now. It's unlike anything else in the franchise in this regard, minus Galaxy 2 of course. You know you have an interesting concept when every single galaxy in the game is worth exploring. I can't even really list any of them that I don't like, because there simply aren't ones that I do not like. That's even better than 64, where I adore every level except Rainbow Ride, so in this aspect, Galaxy is the most balanced game in the series. It's balanced in another very surprising way as well, which is the actual story of the game. In addition to the game's main plot, which is about as involved in the gameplay as any other Mario game, there's some optional backstory you can listen to that goes further in depth to Rosalina as a character, and how she became the leader of the Lumas. It's incredibly interesting, and it makes you feel like she's the actual important part to the series, rather than a one-off character that would only appear in this game. It is only optional and doesn't impact the main story, but it's cool to listen to these storybooks nonetheless. Have I even mentioned the game's visuals yet? I haven't? I better get on that then. Even to this day, nearly 18 years later, this game still looks phenomenal. It hasn't aged a day at all, despite the fact that it's on the Wii. It looks like an Xbox 360 game, and a lot of that mostly comes down to the game's amazing art style. I think it's fair to say that this was the game where Nintendo had perfected the Mario art style that we're accustomed to today, having since just tried to take what Galaxy did and improve upon it. For a good reason, of course, because from everything down to the lighting, the vibrant colors, the character designs, the effects, and the UI, this game is everything a Mario game should aspire to look like. It's incredible how despite how big these worlds are, everything still has a smooth look to it. The polygons aren't that noticeable at all while the game always maintains a constant 60 frames per second, which was a first for 3D Mario. 64 and Sunshine were all 30 FPS on their original hardware, and Galaxy comes in and has the best visual fidelity and performance. Given how the Wii was basically just an overclocked GameCube, it's downright awe-striking how much better it looks in comparison to Sunshine, even technologically. To branch off a bit from the discussion of the game's visuals, a lot of the galaxies of the game have these planets that you can roam around, being basically like small planets. Unlike practically every other game at the time, Galaxy has a gravity system where each geological body has its own gravity that tugs down on Mario, and there are times where you have to change where you push the analog stick according to where you are on the planet. Sometimes you look like you're upside down, and the controls can switch in the exact moment due to that. The game sometimes has these missions where you have to transition between shifts of gravity, and it makes those platforming segments something Galaxy could call its own, amongst many other things in the game. It allows you to experiment a little bit more on how to move Mario on these planets within the galaxy, and it's one of the defining traits of the game. I've seen some people say how it can get a little bit annoying when you're on the bottom of a planet, and then Mario will go the exact opposite way of where you want to go, due to a shift of perspective, but once you get the hang of how the gravity system works, it becomes a non-issue. Another aspect of this game that would be later used in the series would be secondary currency. You still have your coins and stuff, and that's all well and good. Coins are a staple of Mario, but you also have these things called star bits, which can be obtained on the map, either just out on the open, you have to collect them by moving the Wiimote's pointer onto them, or in blocks. You can use these star bits to either temporarily stun enemies, which I never do since it's pointless, or use them to unlock extra galaxies, which give them an even more important use than the coins. I believe that every 3D Mario game should have its own secondary currency. It gives another thing to the game that makes it unique compared to the others, and the applications can vary between games. There was technically the blue coins from Sunshine, but I don't really count those since those are basically just hard to find coins that get you shine sprites. It's also very satisfying to see the starbit counter go down when you feed these incredibly fat Loomis that you help make even more fat, and they explode into the air, causing a new galaxy to be born. The game is basically telling you that not helping obesity is a good thing, and even rewards you for it. It honestly kind of reminds me of those fat toes from Mario and Luigi's Bowser's Inside Story. Did Nintendo just have a fat fetish at the time? They're even more satisfying to actually collect the coins too, since you can collect them even when you're not deliberately walking into them. Like I just mentioned, you collect them with the Wiimote pointer, and it's awesome when you get a chain together and get a bunch of star bits at the same time. It's all what makes me glad that they brought back secondary currency in Odyssey in the form of purple coins. Galaxy is also surprisingly the first 3D Mario game to bring back power-ups as well. There was the caps in 64, but I would hardly call those power-ups. They mostly just allowed you to get stars specifically made for those caps. Galaxy, however, brings back staples such as the Fire Flower, Superstar, which acts as the Rainbow Star in this game, and adds in its own set of power-ups, completely new to the series. There's the Bee Mushroom, which lets you fly and grab onto honey walls, the Ice Flower, which apparently debuted in a Mario manga called Super Mario Kun, but it made its first mainline debut in this game, and it lets you walk on water and gives you a speed boost, since he skates around the level rather than run. The Boo Mushroom, which lets you transform into a boo, allowing you to go invisible and hover around the level. The Spring Mushroom, which quite literally puts you inside a spring, and you can bounce around like one. Last but not least, the Red Star, which lets you fly around the Comet Observatory for 60 seconds. Sadly, this power-up is only usable in the observatory to get extra 1-ups, but it's still a very cool power-up regardless. Unlike most of the 2D Mario games, these power-ups actually allow you to traverse the levels in meaningful ways, and certain missions are built around the power-ups. These kinds of levels are usually my favorite ones of the game too, since they are original creations of this game that, for the most part, aren't in any other game, and the level designs themselves are great and allow for experimentation with the movesets granted to you by these power-ups. It's hard to not gush over this game in general. Everything it does incredibly well. I don't even mind that it's once again animation based on Mario's moveset rather than physics based, because the game isn't trying to be the sequel to 64 and Sunshine, it's trying to do its own, wholly unique formula, a formula that can stand on its own and compete with 64 in certain aspects, such as the consistency and sense of wonder. You must imagine that I don't have much to say when it comes to what I think didn't work about the game, and you're right, I don't have much to say, but for the stuff I do have to say, let's discuss that with...
What didn't work?
I know this is pretty unanimously agreed upon, but the health counter when you get to 1 health, it gets really annoying. The beep never stops. Once it starts, it stays until you get back to at least 2. Not a huge deal at all, of course, it's just something that can definitely get on your nerves after a while. Other than that, I just don't have much else to say about what didn't work about the game. Short segment, right? I know. Who would have thought that Super Mario Galaxy, one of the most beloved Mario games of all time, and probably one of the most beloved video games of all time, doesn't have much wrong with it. If 64 is the golden standard for the typical 3D Mario formula, then Galaxy is the golden standard for its own formula. It's something that just cannot be a one-off. Galaxy just begs for a true sequel that takes what it did and improved upon it. Massive task to do so, I am aware, but it literally explores the entire Mario universe. The possibilities here are actually endless. You could have Mario explore new worlds, have new power-ups, further build upon the backstory stuff with Rosalina, introduce new characters to the series. Luckily for us though, Super Mario Galaxy did get a sequel. Ha, just kidding. Instead we got... Do not let that tune in the title fool you like it fooled me. This is basically just Galaxy 1 DLC in the form of a sequel. I do not want that statement to make it seem like I do not like Galaxy 2 or anything. It's still Galaxy. You still have the open-ended galaxies that each have their own linear missions, and it's still visual eye candy, and the missions are still really fun and all that other good stuff, but it's just the exact same game again. It doesn't add anything new to the Mario universe besides letting us explore other galaxies that we didn't get to see in the first game, and some new power-ups in the form of the Rock Mushroom, which lets you become a giant boulder, and the Cloud Mushroom, which lets you spawn clouds and Mario's weight is reduced. Those are all the new power-ups by the way, just those two. There's also the inclusion of Yoshi, which is the biggest addition to the game. That's just the thing though, if your biggest addition is Yoshi, then that should go to show how little you've done compared to the original. Yoshi has his own power-ups though, such as the Dash Pepper, which lets Yoshi go super fast, the Blimp Fruit, which lets Yoshi inflate like a balloon and rise to the air, and the Bull Berry, which lets Yoshi illuminate light, and they are cool to use and even have their own levels dedicated to using them, but it's not enough to make me feel like this addition to the game makes it that much different from the original. It all starts to make sense though when you consider that Galaxy 2 was originally just going to be DLC for Galaxy 1, but since the Wii isn't capable of doing DLC, and apparently they had enough ideas to make it into a full-blown sequel, they decided to do just that. I can understand making it into a sequel due to the Wii's limitations, but there simply isn't enough here that warrants calling this game Galaxy 2, because adding the 2 implies that it does enough to reinvent the formula that was established at Galaxy 1 and it does something different with it, but really, it's just more of the same. I don't really want to spend too much time talking about it. Practically everything I said about Galaxy can be applied to Galaxy 2, but there is one thing I want to discuss, and for this, I will have to skip the what worked section and go straight to the what didn't work, since the things that make Galaxy 1 work are exactly the things that make Galaxy 2 work. In saying that, here is...
What didn't work?
It has always rubbed me in the wrong way how with Galaxy 2, the story's significance has been cut back to what you expect from a normal Mario game. It has the same exact setup as the first game, what with the Star Festival and such. Mario gets invited, Mario goes to the castle, Peach gets kidnapped again, and Mario's gotta save her. There is no backstory at the beginning because we already know what the Star Festival is about, but I would have expected at least something new added to the lore that would have gave this game's story more significance, but there isn't anything of the sort. You don't even get to see Rosalina until you've collected 120 power stars. She is completely absent from the game's story besides that. The main story just consists of Mario going in different galaxies to get enough power stars to save Peach, which is just like Galaxy 1, but with none of the extra lore they threw in there to give us some more world building and to put into scale the significance of Mario's journey to save Peach. The lack of care for the story makes me just view this entire game as a whole as just what I had said before. It's like it knows it's just Galaxy 1 again, so why quote unquote bore us with the details? We at Nintendo what you like. Go save Peach for the 435th time. Woohoo! It feels like a speedrun of itself, which sounds incredibly weird to say. That's all I really have for the what didn't work section of the game. I hope this shorter segment shows I don't hate the game, far from it. It wouldn't make sense for me to love Galaxy 1 and then hate Galaxy 2, when Galaxy 2 is just more of Galaxy 1, but I can't help but be let down by how little was added, how little was changed, and how little the strong boy I got is. On the plus side, you can play as Luigi in some of the levels, which I always did whenever they gave you the option because I much prefer Luigi over Mario. The thing with Mario is that he always goes like,
It's me, Mario. I'm going to choose another personality. Woohoo!
while Luigi goes like,
That's Mama Luigi to you, Mario!
That concludes the Galaxy lineage, and now we have another lineage we need to tackle, something that's a bit more 3D. Well, not really. Our first mainline 3D Mario game on a handheld, kinda surprised it took that long. There is Super Mario 64 DS, but that's just a remake of 64 on the DS. It's purely just another way to play the game, and why I didn't talk about it in this video. Released on November 3rd, 2011 in Japan and November 13th in North America for the Nintendo 3DS, Super Mario 3D Land is what you get when you take 2D Mario and put it into the realm of 3D. Unlike the Galaxy games, which were right in the middle between 3D Mario and 2D Mario, 3D Land leans more towards the 2D side of the series, and it may as well be a 2D Mario game, it's just that now you have a C-axis. The progression is exactly like the 2D Mario games, each level is a point A to B, and you have a linear world map that takes you to the next world. Also much like 2D Mario, there is no story whatsoever, just go save Peach for the 586th time. There is a plethora of levels in the game, including silos you can choose to do for extra star coins, which are basically this game's power stars. There is always 3 star coins to get in a level, and they're usually right out in the open or require a little bit of thinking to get. These star coins are important, as some of the levels are locked off to a certain number of star coins that need to be collected. Collect as many star coins as you can in the levels until you get to the final level and finally save Peach. In this particular adventure to save Peach, Mario has access to power-ups that work just like how they do in the 2D games, and these consist of the Super Mushroom, which was brought back since there's no health bar this time. Damage works just like the 2D games. If you get hit, you become small, and if you get hit again, you die. There's also the Fire Flower, self-explanatory, the Superstar, also self-explanatory, the Super Leaf, which makes its grand return from Super Mario Bros. 3 and is the game's premier power-up, the Boomerang Flower, which gives Mario the ability to throw out boomerangs, and an invincible version of the Super Leaf called the Invincibility Leaf. It's all pretty straightforward 2D Mario stuff, but again, in 3D. The game is pretty short too, around 3 to 4 hours long, and in general it doesn't have too much going on, and I honestly don't have much to say about it, but there are some things I'd like to discuss, so let's not waste any time and make our way to the
What worked?
I do appreciate how fast paced the game is in comparison to the previous 3D games. You can blast through these levels once you know the locations of the star coins, and it feels great to do so. Much like the best of 2D Mario, the fun comes from optimizing how you complete these levels in the quickest and most efficient way possible. It's been a while since I have played the game, so I was a little slow, but I started to get the hang of it again pretty quickly. Due to its simpler nature, it makes it very easy to come back to and just blast through the game. A little bit of a detriment to the game though, but I will discuss that more in the next section. The game looks really good for a 3DS game too, kind of expected since it was made to be a bit of a tech demo for the system, but something to praise it for nonetheless. I don't have much else to say about what worked. It's a very standard Mario game, 3D or not. It's kind of just a fun romp through the levels and not much more. I do have more to discuss about the game in the next section though, so let's talk about
What didn't work?
I'm just gonna be blunt here. The game is too easy. I know how he said it's fun to blast through the levels and to optimize your time, but it's more fun to do that in a game like Super Mario World due to how that game actually has some challenge to it. 3D Land feels like it caters too much to children to really feel like I accomplished much out of shaving off 20 seconds in a level, when said level, and every other level in the game, is easy. It makes the game easier to consume, but I don't play games just to experience them. I want at least a little bit of challenge as well. It feels like Child's first platform in this regard, just a souped up VTech game in terms of difficulty. It doesn't help that the Super Leaf is busted and a big part of why the game is so easy. You can skip entire levels due to how good it is. The difficulty of the game as a whole is a big part of why, even though I beat the game in one sitting, I wasn't having that much fun doing so. The game more so thrives from playing a few levels when you're out and about, and then putting your 3DS away again. It doesn't help that a lot of the level design is some of the most generic Mario level designs you can think of from a 2D Mario game, but in 3D. It makes the game feel samey, just like another 2D Mario, even though you'd think that the aspect of having a C-axis would be more interesting, when all they really do with it is having obstacles to Mario's left and right, instead of just front and behind them. I honestly prefer when a game is just flat out bad, but at least it's interesting. interesting, rather than an admittedly alright game, but it doesn't do much of anything. It can get boring if you choose to play more than an hour of it in one sitting. I just don't really have much to say about 3D Land. It's kind of just what you would imagine a 3D Mario game to be like if the word Mario came up in your head, and it doesn't have much going for it that makes me want to come back to it. It's why before in the Sunshine section of the video, I was talking about how surprised I was when I hear people say Sunshine is the black sheep of the 3D Mario games, when 3D Land exists, and it's as mediocre as it is. Sunshine actually had interesting level design and fun missions, which is something I can't exactly say about 3D Land. Thankfully though, they made a sequel that was actually a proper sequel that fixed a lot of the issues I have with 3D Land, and that will be further discussed in... Released on November 21st, 2013 in Japan and November 22nd in North America, Super Mario 3D World is the direct sequel to 3D Land, and boy oh boy is this a sequel. The game starts with this cutscene where Mario and Luigi fix this weird looking queer pipe, which spurts out a lot of power-ups, with a Springsy Princess coming out afterwards, a furry-like species that was introduced with this game. The Springsy Princess tells us about how Bowser has kidnapped the rest of the Springsy Princesses, and that she needs your help to rescue them. Just after the exclamation ends, Bowser must have noticed that he missed one, and kidnaps the green Springsy Princess as well. I guess Bowser must have gotten tired of kidnapping Peach this time and decided to kidnap some other princesses. Mario and gang. Yes, gang. Since you aren't limited to just Mario this time, you can play as Luigi, Toad, Peach, and even Rosalina. But I played as only Luigi for this playthrough because Luigi is simply the best character in the entire series, besides Wario. Go through the different worlds of the game to collect the green stars you need to foil Bowser's plans, with the green stars being this game's version of the star coins from 3D Land. The game is a lot more open-ended than 3D Land as well, and to compensate, they brought back some of 3D Mario's moveset, getting such moves as the crouch jump, side somersault, long jump, wall kick, and ground pound. Not only are the levels more open-ended and more, well, 3D, but even the world map has been expanded, unlike 3D Land, which was a linear world map like the 2D games. In 3D World, it functions more like a hub world that has the same function as a world map, being able to freely move around it, and sometimes there's things to interact with, such as the slots machine that appears after you beat a certain number of levels within the world. The worlds themselves have themes that are Mario traditions, such as a snow world and a desert world, but they actually went about making these interesting in a good way by using the theme to their advantage when making the level design. There is a circus theme in the game that is used for some levels and even a boss, and these are usually my favorite levels of the game due to how creative they are and how they actually use the circus theme. Much like Galaxy, some levels are even designed around the power-ups of the game, which consists of the Fire Flower, the Return of the Super Leaf, the Return of the Boomerang Flower, the Superstar, oddly enough the inclusion of the Mega Mushroom from New Super Mario Bros. DS, and two new power-ups, those being the Super Bell, this game's own premier power-up that sees the most use that turns you into a cat, being given cat-like abilities such as clawing enemies, being able to climb walls, and the Double Cherry, which simply clones you, being able to control yourself and however many clones you've accumulated. It's an interesting but welcome roster of power-ups and makes the levels even more fun to traverse. Every level is designed around the Super Bell, so it never once feels like you're too powerful with it, even if it is still a powerful item. I just want to get right into this since I got quite a bit to say, so let's start this off with...
What worked?
Of course, one of the big problems I had with 3D Land was the fact that it was too easy, and that it felt like it catered too much to younger children. 3D World, however, even though it's still relatively easy, actually does have more challenge to it. Some of the green stars are hidden away in more clever locations, and it encourages you to explore the level more, especially since there actually is more to explore due to how much bigger these levels are in comparison to 3D Land. In comparison to, well, any Mario game actually, the existence of the Super Bell allows for more vertical exploration than ever before, making you not only want to explore what's around you, but also what's above you. And it gives the level design something extra, another layer of complexity that is usually missing in your average Mario game. It's shocking to me how we can go from the average you know what you came here for level design of 3D Land to the open and multi-layer level design of 3D World, and that's exactly what a sequel needs to do. Speaking of the levels in the game overall, just like every other 3D Mario thus far, it looks amazing for the hardware it's on, and even if it were to come out today, no one would bat an eye. I think that's made even more evident when the game got a port to the Switch a few years back. Just like the best of Mario games, they always look like the 3D versions of the 2D artwork for the games in their promotional material, and its cartoony art style is a delight to witness. It always makes you wonder what the next world will look like, as the graphics are genuinely that well done. Another thing that I love about the gameplay is the parts of the game that take a detour from the main gameplay as a way to shake things up, such as the Plessy levels. These function a lot like the Manta Ray levels from Galaxy, and these are always great fun to blast through, since Plessy himself controls very well, not being too slippery or too stiff on the water. There's There's also the Captain Toad levels, and these are always a treat to play through, as they're basically puzzle platformers where you can't jump, and instead have to use the environment to get higher up. These levels got so much praise that Nintendo even decided to take this concept and make it into its own game with Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. Variety is the spice of life, and that's a philosophy that 3D World takes to heart with the great level design and the secondary levels, and not once does it ever get repetitive because of it. The game took longer to beat than 3D World, taking about 6 hours for me, and I still beat it in one sitting, not once ever getting bored, because it's just that fun. It really did feel like a world that made you want to explore all the nooks and crannies. The boss fights also ramp up with this game, and there's many of them throughout the course of this adventure. Boom Boom and Pom Pom make their return from 3D Land, and they were the only non-Bowser bosses of the game. They have new gimmicks this time around, like with Pom Pom being like a ninja and turning invisible, whilst throwing shurikens at the player. There's also new bosses, such as Motley Boss Blob, who is this giant gesture that stomps around and splits into pieces in an effort to beat the player, but the player can attain double cherries to combat the boss's own multiplication. It's a really fun boss fight, and you fight him twice throughout the game. The final boss is the real kicker though. It's where Bowser absorbs the power of the Super Belt and becomes the cat form of himself, named Meowser. Much like yourself, Meowser can climb up walls and claw the player. Meowser also takes a bunch of double cherries, making him even more of a stage obstacle than he was before. The only way you can beat him is by using the Super Pow Block, which sends him flying into the sky, exploding like fireworks. This is where you save all of the Springtime princesses once and for all, with that being the conclusion to the game. The climax of this game is absolutely spectacular, with a lot of, well, spectacle, and is something I always look forward to when I replay the game. It's appalling just how much better of a game 3D World is compared to 3D Land. I enjoy practically every aspect of this game, and I don't really have anything I can think of that I would say didn't work about it. This is how you do a 2D Mario game in 3D, and I don't know why I ever used to enjoy 3D Land over World as a kid. That's why for the first time in this video, we're not doing a what didn't work section. You can take this transition slide and throw it away for right now, because 3D Land is a great game within its own formula. I still prefer when a 3D Mario game has its own open worlds with non-linear objectives in them, but there is a reason why I love 2D and 3D Mario equally, and 3D World takes what I like the most about 2D Mario and gives it some of that 3D Mario energy. In talking about 3D Mario games that have open worlds with non-linear objectives in them, however, it would only make sense to transition to the last game of the video, the perfect reminder of what a 3D Mario game could be. It's time to jump up in the air and soar away, since I'll now be talking about... What a game this is, man. Replaying it after having first beat it years ago really made me appreciate how great this game is, more so than I did before. There's a ton to be said about this game, so let's get right into it. Released in October 27, 2017 for most of the world, Super Mario Odyssey is the true sequel to 64 and Sunshine. After 15 years of the formula being laid dormant and being mixed in with elements of 2D Mario, Odyssey is as true 3D Mario as can be. We can say hello to the open worlds with their own non-linear objectives again, because they are back in full force and just beg you to explore these worlds for all they are worth, which is a ton. The game opens in with a showdown between Mario and Bowser, the latter of whom has kidnapped Peach for the 999th time, and Bowser is even all dressed up in a suit, planning to marry Peach once and for all. Despite the fact that there is no universe of danger here like in Galaxy, you can still feel that the stakes here are higher than ever before, especially since, shockingly enough, Bowser actually wins this fight between Mario, and Mario is sent flying miles away from where they are. Mario wakes up from being knocked out in the middle of Cap Kingdom, the first area of the game, and basically acts as a tutorial level. Much like the outside of Peach's castle in 64, this is where you can see how Mario controls in this new 3D Mario game, which is much warranted since like I had said before, it had been 15 years since the last true 3D Mario, so there's bound to be some new stuff here. You will see that Mario has the moves we've come to know him for intact, such as the triple jump, side somersault, backwards somersault, long jump, wall kick, ground pound jump, alongside the new additions in Mario's base moveset, such as the roll, which lets you speed up and roll around the map, rolling faster if you're on declining terrain. Mario must think he's Sonic or something, but it is a very useful move for traversing these huge levels. There is also the dive, which is done by doing a ground pound, but in the animation, press the Y or X button. This lets you get more horizontal distance in the air. Eventually, you will meet up with a hat creature person thing that goes by the name of Cappy, who had taken what remained of Mario's hat from the scuffle with Bowser. He talks to us about how Bowser had also kidnapped his sister, Tiara, and since they have a common enemy, they should team up to rescue both Peach and Tiara. Cappy takes the form of Mario's hat, and you can throw him for various uses. You can simply throw it midair to stall your stuff to get a bit more horizontal distance and clear slightly bigger gaps. You can throw it as an attack, you can use it as a platform and make it act like a double jump in the air. And the most interesting use of Cappy in the game, take control of something. We're introduced to this particular mechanic by throwing Cappy at a frog, which liquefies Mario and makes him go into this weird, trippy interdimension warp hole. I couldn't even tell you what's going on here. Either way, you take control of the frog, and you can use the frog's abilities to traverse higher up the level. This control mechanic has given me a very good idea though. Hey viewer, think fast. Ha! You're in my control now. Now I'll make you like the rest of my video. Get that shameless self-advertising out of here. Let's instead use this mechanic to take control of a Goomba, a Hammer Bro, a Bullet Bill, and even a damn realistic looking dinosaur. Like what kind of game am I playing right now? Once you wrap your head around being able to control almost anything, you eventually get to the end of the Cap Kingdom, where you have to fight the leader of the Brutals, who are rabbits that work under Bowser and are trying to protect his wedding from getting crashed. Beat him up, and then this power line appears out of nowhere that takes you to the next level of the game, which are classified as kingdoms. Throw Cappy at it to become a literal ball of electricity, and you go zooming towards the next kingdom, which is the Cascade Kingdom. It's here where we are met with the game's first actual level, with its own collectible power moons, which are obviously the power stars of this game, and the main ones you collect by doing that kingdom's main objectives, with there usually being a multi-moon that gives you 3 power moons, normally tied to being a boss. There's also the purple coins that are tied to each kingdom. You can exchange these at the Crazy Cap clothing store for new outfits that Mario can wear. The boss of this kingdom being the true boss of the Brutals, who goes by Madame Brood, and her giant golden chain chomp named Chain Chompykins. Every kingdom has its own end of level boss, and it's usually one of the Brutals or a boss tied to that kingdom, like Cookatoo of the Luncheon Kingdom. Besides the main objectives, a lot of the collectible moons are just that, collectibles, that you get through numerous means, either by finding them throughout the map, or through puzzles, like this one power moon that you only get by posing as a Cheep Cheep to one of the locked ladies in the kingdom. The game is filled with these, and in general, there's so many unique ways that power moons can be collected that I'd be here all day if I were to try and describe all of them. There's actually a whopping 999 power moons in the game. Jesus Christ, did they not think 120 was enough? However, it's due to the fact that there's so many power moons that how you go about getting to the main goal, which is 124 power moons, is entirely up to you, besides the main objective power moons. This doesn't imply if you're going for 100% of course, which will definitely take you tens of hours, but I just collected enough to traverse through the kingdoms and some extra, so there was no sense of, oh man, I desperately need a guide to get to the end of the game. How you go about the game is entirely up to you, which is just like how 64 handled it, and I am so glad they brought back that non-linear progression system. The kingdoms themselves are something you had to do in order though, only ever getting one choice on what kingdom to do next once you get to the Snow Kingdom and the Seaside Kingdom. I don't care that much though, especially when each kingdom usually has around 40 or more moons, and with how massive all these worlds are, you'll be finding them everywhere. Once you do get 124 power moons though, then you can finally fight Bowser at the Moon Kingdom, who you had fought before in the Cloud Kingdom, but this is the final fight with him. You simply gotta avoid his shadow hats, throw a Cappy at the real hat, and use Bowser's hat against him, since it's loaded with boxing gloves. Beat Bowser, and you'll have to take control of him yourself, which has to be the most badass part of the game. It makes you feel so powerful, tearing apart anything that gets in your way. Once you escape the area's collapse, you return to the moon, and Mario goes in to try to propose to Peach himself, having dress for the occasion. Bowser knocks over Mario though in an effort to still marry Peach after their wedding was ruined, but Mario presses fervor, with Peach eventually getting fed up with the two, establishing that she won't marry either of them. This leaves Bowser crying on the floor, with Mario there to comfort him. It's so hilarious how Peach rejects the both of them, even Mario, who has saved her over 1,000 times. I'm just saying, Daisy would never. That's why Luigi is also the luckier of the two. The credits roll after this cutscene, and this is the conclusion to one of the best Mario games of all time. I can see why the game is called Super Mario Odyssey, because this game is the perfect representation of Odyssey as a word. From start to finish, this game is a journey, filled with breathtaking locales, the ambition and skill to the gameplay, brilliant progression system, and amazing controls. Let's just cut right to what I want to say about the game, because I can't wait to do so.
What worked?
What worked? I'll tell you what worked. How about, I don't know, everything? Down to the game's visuals, which are no doubt the best to date, and in general, it's the best looking Mario game of all time. The lighting, the texture work, the brilliant Mario art style that's at its best with this game, and the amazing level design. This game is the best eye-candy Mario has to offer. The game even experiments with different themes. Like one level you have this tropical island that's filled with a poisonous sea, that has a somber feel to it with the darker lighting in the form of the Lost Kingdom. Metro Kingdom, which is literally just New York City but in Mario's world, with its inhabitants, those course being the new Donkers, looking just like normal humans, to the Ruined Kingdom, which is this area with realistic visuals, complete with a boss fight where you fight against a literal dragon that looks like it came out of Elden Ring. I have no idea what it's doing in a Mario game, but I can't help but love it for how unique it is, and taking the concept of the game to its absolute limits. The game's focus on exploring these different kingdoms that all have their own customs and culture reminds me a lot of the main focus of Sonic Unleashed, where the game had a very similar concept where you would explore different countries that also had their own cultures. Have I even mentioned the music? The music of each kingdom is all great to listen to. Here's some pieces from the game. They all fit their respective kingdoms very well, and are great songs even in isolation. I even listened to some of the music myself while making this video, which is saying a lot considering this is so far my longest video to date. The controls are also just, oh my god, they're so good. They're animation based and not physics based, which is always a bummer, especially in this game where the worlds are so big that physics based movement and momentum would really aid the game's fun factor. Mario himself is incredibly snappy, having the perfect balance between slippery and stiff. The moveset you're given, along with the extra abilities Cappy gives you, allows you to make it across gaps and obstacles that you didn't even know was possible in a Mario game, and it's incredibly satisfying to figure out the best ways to get to a certain part of the level by using Cappy for shortcuts. There are no power-ups in the game, but when your core moveset is as complex as it is, power-ups are nothing but unnecessary addition, especially when technically, the many different captures are your power-ups. A lot of these captures have their own moons tied to them, and it makes you want to explore the levels again, but with the captures available to you, to see if there's any other moons you may have missed out on. It all ties into what I said about how there's so many different ways to get moons, and I would be here all day if I were to list all of them, so I'll just leave it at that. I've talked about practically everything major that works about the game, but I would also like to give some mentions to the smaller things, such as the boss fights themselves, and how unique they are, even if there are some reuses with the Brutals, but they change up enough with their return encounters that it still feels like a different boss, even if only slightly. There's even this giant mech boss in Bowser's Kingdom where all the Brutals team up to beat Mario, but even their combination is thwarted by Mario and Cappy. Much like most other Mario boss fights, it's 3 hits and you're gone, and that's the same situation here. All of these fights are tied to most of the objective power stars, so you're bound to play through all of them. I also love every outfit in the game. There didn't even need to be any alternate outfits, but I love how they're there to give you more incentive to explore the levels for the purple coins. You got such outfits like the cowboy outfit, the swimmer outfit, the aviator outfit, the golf outfit, the sailor outfit, and even an outfit where you could be a samurai, and so much more. Outside of the clothing, the purple coins don't have any other use, but some clothes are essential to getting some of the moons, so it's important to get the purple coins to get those outfits if you want those moons. That concludes this section of Odyssey, so naturally we gotta get into the what didn't work section of the video, right? Well, just like 3D World, I have literally nothing bad to say about the game. It was an Odyssey filled with greatness after greatness, and even if I do miss when Mario's moveset was physics-based, Mario still controls wonderfully, allowing for so many possibilities with the shenanigans that Cappy is capable of. With that being said, I have officially constructively looked at every 3D Mario game, and what a road to the present day has been. It's insane to think that 3D Mario will be almost 30 years old, and Odyssey itself turns 8 this year. It's been nearly a decade since the last mainline 3D Mario game, excluding Bowser's Fury, which is basically just an expansion of 3D World using the mechanics of Odyssey within 3D World's engine. With the Switch 2 on the horizon, what's next for 3D Mario, and the Mario series as a whole? Where does it go from here? What will they do? How could they make the next 3D Mario game the best in the series? I'm sure we'll all have different opinions on that last question, but I wish to talk about my own point of view with this last section of the video, where I answer that question and talk about how I think Nintendo could go about making the next 3D Mario game the best in the series. I'll be discussing
what to do for the next 3D Mario game.
I am of course by no means a game developer, but I wish to share some ideas I think could be added to make the next 3D Mario game the best in the series, and I can see most of you guys agreeing with me. First off, like I've been mentioning numerous times throughout the course of this video, bringing back the physics-based movement 64 already. There is a reason why it's the game with the biggest speedrunning community of the series, and the ceiling is nigh unreachable, and there are still new techniques being made to this day. 3D Mario is at its best when both the moveset is intricate and detailed, and when the environments are made around the moveset. So please, for the love of God, make levels based around a physics-based moveset again. I am unsure of what the next 3D Mario game could do when it comes to a secondary gimmick like with Flood and Cappy, but I do know that its secondary mechanics should build off of Mario's moveset, not compensate for his moveset, moveset and feel like you can't do much without the secondary mechanic if it were taken away from you. Mario's base moveset needs to feel like Mario functions just fine without the secondary mechanic. It's just that the secondary mechanic adds to his base moveset, making you feel like you can accomplish more with it. In terms of the levels, on top of making the environment designed around Mario's moveset, it should always strive to have a fast scale that makes you think that there is more to this world than meets the eye, which is something 64, Galaxy, and Odyssey did very well. If I had to say which one of the games did it best, it would have to be 64, which still had very open levels that made you feel like they were bigger than they really are, while still being basically an aid of control to Mario and how you roamed around these levels, and it's a big part of why I still prefer 64 over Odyssey. I think it also very much depends on what Nintendo does to go about making a 3D Mario game, whether or not they want to go with the Galaxy or 3D Land and 3D World approach again, but I'm talking strictly 3D Mario, like 64, Sunshine, and Odyssey. I wouldn't want them to do another true 3D Mario game, but Nintendo could always end up surprising us. They're literally known for that. I think how I would go about making a true 3D Mario game, it would be to have the physics-based moveset of 64, the levels being entirely designed around Mario's moveset like 64, the non-linear progression with the moons like with Odyssey, which I feel was better handled in Odyssey, as there was so many more to be collected, and there was even more choice on which ones to collect over 64, and you usually have better objectives tied to them, and with a secondary mechanic that works much like Cappy, and a combination of all that combined would, in my opinion, result in the ultimate 3D Mario game. Of course, the best graphics in the series and brilliant music are a must. That doesn't need to be further elaborated on, and it's the most obvious thing to have that we can all agree on. That's my interpretation of what the best 3D Mario game would be like, but I would love to hear what you guys have as your own interpretation for what the best one would be like, and we can discuss it more in the comments below. I doubt that Nintendo will disappoint. Nintendo has been pretty consistent with Mario ever since the release of Odyssey, with the port of 3D World to the Switch, the release of Super Mario Bros. Wonder, which is my second favorite 2D Mario game in the series, right below Super Mario World, and one of the best video game movie adaptations of the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Mario has a bright future, even without Charles Martinet there to voice him in those future adventures, which is of course sad, but was bound to happen. Whatever Nintendo has in store for the Mario series next, and especially what they have in store next for 3D Mario, I will always be there to check the latest news and speculation, which a lot of the time can be just as fun as the game itself. Smash fans will know what I'm talking about. With all that being said, thank you guys for your time, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day. And I hope that this constructive analysis of the 3D series has made you reflect on what you value the most out of these games, whatever that may be for you. Considering that this has been my most ambitious and longest video yet, I had to end it off with something just as ambitious. Something grand. Something that— nah, screw it, this video is long enough, see you guys later, bye!